Hello, my name's David Roberts, and as you can see, this is Merseyside. At the risk of sounding like an advertisement for lager, the River Mersey was once the home of the busiest, probably the best, general cargo shipping company in the world, Blue Funnel. To be more precise, Alfred Holts. But to all those who worked on them, sailed on them, or just waited for them to come home, they'll always be known as Blueys, or the China boats, and they sailed from the Mersey. This film is not intended to be a complete history of Blue Funnel. That can be found elsewhere. This is a different story. This is the story of the China boats, where they came from, where they went to, and those who spent much of their lives on and around them, as well as the friends and shipmates that they made along the way. There are some intriguing stories as well. Why are these men still signing articles with Blue Funnel, long after the company is gone? And Holts was often referred to as the Welsh Navy. So what has this little pub on Anglesey got to do with the Blue Funnel line? And how did this man's foray into the diamond dealing business in Colombo backfire on him? The filmmakers are particularly grateful to those ex-Blue Funnel men who contributed their old cine films and their memories to this project. It could not have been done without them. We hope that we have done you all, and all who sailed at some time or other for Holts, justice. This story starts here, on the streets of Birkenhead, on the banks of the River Mersey. More often than not, the men who sailed from Victoria Dock would walk, take a bus or a taxi down these once familiar roads. Maybe even have a pint at the world famous Victoria Vaults, more well known as the Piggies. But why did so many join Blue Funnel? How did they get started? I asked some of them to reminisce a little, and one man told of his delight at joining Holts, and some stories of a steward.
And just a week before my 16th birthday, I wrote to Holts, and less than a week I got a letter back for an interview in Odyssey Works, Birkenhead. So I got time off the crane to go and have the interview, and Mr. Petroy was the chap in charge of boy ratings for catering departments, which I went into. And I had the interview, passed the medical, and next thing he said, right, he said, you're accepted for Blue Fun Line, you'll be going to the Outward Bound Trading School at Abu Dhabi, and then you'll be given the ship to go away to sea. Well, I just couldn't believe it. I floated out at Odyssey Works, and people who were walking past, strangers, I just felt like shouting out to them, I've joined Blue Fun Line, and that's how I come to get in Alfred Holts. I was dead lucky really, because the first voyage was on the Hector, and she was an Australian ship, and at the time she was the fastest single screw vessel in the world, and she had steam turbine engines, like 21, 22 knots they could do. And NASA, we had the war with NASA, when they closed the Suez Canal, and he closed the canal down. So luckily for me, that particular voyage, it was a round the world voyage.
Right.
So we went all around the African coast up to Mauritius, from Mauritius across the Indian Ocean, the Far East, which Hector never went to, only because of the Suez Canal was closed, all around the Far East. Then from Hong Kong we went down to Australia, round the Australian coast, left Sydney, the last port of call, crossed the Pacific Ocean to the Panama Canal, went to a couple of places in South America, and then homeward bound across the Atlantic. So the voyage lasted just over 5 months. And the thing that stuck in my mind more than anything was, when we left England, I was leaning on the rail, and I was looking out aft on the port side, and one of the ABs was passing, and he said, see that light flashing over there, lad? He said, that's the last thing you see of England for the next few months. And it was the Land's End lighthouse flashing. And that, to see that, thinking, I'm off, I'm off to see the world, the feeling was unbelievable. I've never felt homesick, never missed it, Of course, when I reached 18, that's when they were made up to assistant steward then from boy rating, and they didn't have a position for me on the Hector. So I had to leave the Hector, and I was given then the first ship to the Far East, which was the Light Cane. You laid the tables out, and before every meal the chief steward and second steward used to come into the saloon and inspect your table to make sure everything was spot on. No marks on the glass, they had to be all perfect.
And what if it wasn't?
Well, you got your arse kicked, get that cleaned again, sort of thing. No finger marks on the knives or the forks or whatever, everything had to be white, spotless. Well, I've got it here in a diary I've kept for a few years. I'm assistant steward now, which I was 18, 1958. My wages are now, I'm made up, £30, 10 shillings a month. And overtime from the 24th of the 6.58 to the 24th of the 7.58 was £11, 2 and 6pence. 9 times out of 10 you come back to the ship and you're bloody broke. I mean, I know lads who actually paid off with nothing after a 3.5, 4 month voyage, Yeah. As regards one of my favourite places, I think, for the girls was Kobe in Japan, and I think most of the lads would refer to Kobe. You had Yokohama or Nagoya and all that, those other places, but I think Kobe was the best place. I think the favourite place out of all really was Hong Kong, because they had everything there, and the view that as you came down to enter Hong Kong, at the peak, the mountain with all the buildings going up. Whether you docked there of a night or a daytime was always spectacular. Even today it's still spectacular.
Dave also recalled some of the more unusual and varied sights of a voyage to the east.
The Gilly men they were called. These fellas, they're like, they could do all sorts of conjuring tricks and all that. And they were fascinating to watch. I mean, one of them came along to me once in my cabin, and he said, I'll show you a chicken, baby chicken. So he sort of just tapped me on the shoulder. Next minute I had a t-shirt on, and there was this bloody thing wriggling under my t-shirt, and there was this little baby chicken under my t-shirt. How the hell he got that there, I just don't know, because he just touched me on my arm like that. And this little chicken was there. He brought the chicken out,
Blue Funnel Voyages provided some lucky crewmen and many of their passengers golden opportunities to experience some of the mysteries of Eastern culture, like the snake charmers and magicians of what was then Ceylon. Who could forget the magnificence of some of the ancient wonders of the world? And of course, many China boat lads remember too, getting the chance to marvel at some of the bustling cities ashore, like old Cairo, a very long way from the River Mersey. Sailing through the ditch, otherwise known as the Suez Canal, could often be a relatively dull business with little to see. But it did give the chance to film occasional passing ships, as well as their own ships, and to see the constant dredging required in the canal. On deck there was never a shortage of work. Heavy winch and anchor work with ropes and chains, and much of it was done the old-fashioned way, using wires, ropes, and no shortage at all of elbow grease. Billy Morris tells a little of life on deck as a young lad and some of his other adventures.
We looked after the crew, washed the dishes and kept the accommodation clean, and had the belts now and again when, when we did anything wrong.
Yeah. Who used to belt you?
The old ABs.
Oh,
The first time I came home off a long jag, we docked in Tilbury in London, and this old boatswain, old Salty Smith, said to me, come here. And he got me, and he gave me the big white £5 note. He gave me that in my hand, and the rest of my money he put in me discharge book and stitched it in my inside pocket of my coat, and he said, leave it there till you get home. And funny enough, one of the ABs had his pocket snipped on the train on the way home. Did I tell you about when we tapped the hatch?
Go on.
And we got a few bob, and I went ashore in Colombo to buy a diamond. And this went to this shop, £100, this diamond. It was on the Manila, I think it was. And I went ashore, bought this diamond, and he got hold of it, and he put it on the floor, and he got a penny. He put a penny on it, and jumped on it, and all the penny bent. Then he picked it up, and I watched him like a hawk. I never took me. And he lifted the diamond up, and he put it in this box, and give it me. And I got back to the ship, you know, and I got all hands there, hey, look at this. And I put it on the deck, put a penny on it, and jumped on it. Million pieces. How the hell he done it, I don't know, but his hand was there. Thing. We used to buy rings and things like that, and you'd put it in the knot of your tie when you come home.
Yeah.
Yeah, or a French letter in your toothpaste.
Yeah.
All different ways to get through the customs, you know. I was a deck boy, and this Wilson, put the kit of soup over my head and hit me on the head with the ladle. And this AB, big lad, Frank Back, his name was, he come and dragged him off me and give him a smack, you know, for doing it. Anyway, must have been 10 years later, and I was on the gangway in Singapore, and this Wilson is coming up the gangway. And I said, I've waited 10 years for this. And I smacked him right back down onto the quay. He never come back. By the time I left, I was a wiser fella, and I could look after myself. I never depended on nobody. It taught me a way of life. We were a different breed, I think. Not know why, but I think we were. Like we could swear at each other and it meant nothing. And yet you could swear here and you'd end up fighting. Just a different breed, different way of life. But I mean, all my kids were brought up on Blue Funnel. When you're looking at the television and you see something and you've all been there, but it's all different now.
Yeah.
I mean, the likes of Hong Kong never had skyscrapers like it is now. I mean, we were used to going to Kowloon and that. It was far different. All these places, Japan and everywhere, it's all different now. It's all built up. I mean, we went away, the days of derricks. I mean, now it's all cranes and everything, push button.
Yeah.
Ours was the old wire, you know.
Yeah.
It's a far different place. The likes of us is we're a dying breed. Never be us again. If I could make one more trip, I'd go on the Jap run. Hong Kong, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Kobe, Japan. Around the Japanese coast and back home the same way.
Yeah.
That'd be marvellous.
Singapore and Japan certainly had plenty to offer the young men of Blue Funnel ships, and there was no shortage of distractions for them, as you can see. Back on board ship, there was always work for the China boat's engineers, both on deck and in the noisy world of down below, where even the most modern of engine rooms still make demands upon their engineers. One ex-chief engineer recalls the scariness of his first voyage as a young man, when he was the lowest of the low.
My first voyage was hard, I got to see, because you were cut off from your mother's apron strings. There was nobody there wiping your nose or anything like that, you know. You were right at it. You were the lowest of the low. You were right down the bottom, so everybody sort of chased you around, and it was totally foreign. The house you lived on kept moving around all over the place. You know, you went into the tropics, the heat. We had no air conditioning or anything like that, so that was a sort of a wrench to you, particularly in the engine room. So all these things together, and also you know, you're away from home for say 4 months. The whole lot. I think the first voyage was the one. If you got through that, you'd cracked it. Yeah. We used to have an expression then, you know, these lads that do 11 voyages, you know, 1 out and 1 home.
That was enough.
That was enough. But after that, of course, you know, once you break into it, it just gets into the blood. Some were bad cargoes to load, you know, and to stow. You get what they would call awkward stows, you know, stuff getting in here and putting in, getting it out of the ship. And, we did quite a few liquid. In those days, we used to do liquid cargoes as well. You know, we used to carry palm oils and olive oils, and then we used to carry the latex, the rubber latex. And that was quite an education. If you speak to one of the mates, they'll tell you about that. Like that was a job in itself. You know, waxing up the tanks.
Yeah.
Blue Funnel. We seem to have this. We were certainly arrogant. I mean, if you were in Blue Funnel, when you were sailing, there was nobody like you in the world. Like nobody could run ships as good as us, manned ships. They couldn't get people as good as us. You know, I mean, this was something that was bred into you. You know, and that's what you believed. You know, I'm very fortunate now that I still meet a lot of, you know, the people I was with, or ex-seafarers. So you can still go and sit down, have a few beers with them, and you can still spout. And they can still tell you your fortune, and you can tell them their fortune, and there's no, you know, animosity, or there's no bad feeling like that. You can be honest and open with them, you know, just speak your mind, and which is very difficult ashore. You know, you have to watch your P's and Q's, and who you're sitting with, what you're doing, and all that kind of thing. You know. That you do miss.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, when you think of it as a maritime nation, an island nation, what we were, and now, I don't think there's anything sailing under the UK flag. It's just a very, very sad thing to have happened.
Back in the good old days, ex-Chief Steward Jack Graham remembers how he joined Blueys, his work, and an unusual meeting with his boss.
I went for an interview with a fellow named Tommy Bitston, was the superintendent at the time, and he said, "All right, son, you know, that's nothing." And he said, "We've got to get a letter from your mother," because my dad had been killed at sea. He was killed in 1940 with EDs, and anyway, it went from there, and I had a letter from him to say that I'd been accepted to go to sea, and that I should report to the doctor. I had to go down to the doctors and be examined, and everything was okay. Then he sent me to the Conway, and I was on the Conway. I think I was on the Conway for 9 or 10 months, and I went from there to Abu Dhabi. So I went to Blue Flu and made a few bob, £7 a month. £7 a month. And for that, we used to have to work 70 hours a week for our £7. And if we worked over 70 hours, we'd get, I think it was either 1 and 6 or £1 an hour, like that. But the chief steward was in such a way that they never asked you to work overtime. Having said all that, when I went into this Antina, which was just finished trooping, and she'd just been converted from a merchant cruiser, armed merchant cruiser, to a passenger ship. She carried 60 passengers then. The accommodation was unknown in Blue Funnel. We had our 2-berth room with curtains on. Quite a sizable room it was too, where if you worked on the top, there were 2 bunks in it. The top bunk had the curtains and the downstairs bunk had curtains in it. Never known before. We had a mess room with a radiogram in. What else was on there? Modern showers, everything. Whereas on the Nestor, they were still sleeping in the forecastle head. I used to do cut all the cold meats up, do the salads and stuff like that. Help the pantry man. Actually working in the pantry. When the stewards came in from the saloon for meals, naturally we used to dish it up into dishes and so forth. They'd take it out, they'd tell us what they wanted. And away they went with the dish. But I used to fill all the dishes up and stuff like that. And in between meal times, naturally I'd do all the cutting up, carving and stuff like that. I was quite happy being at sea, well fed. I mean, the food in Blue Funnel was excellent. It really was. And I mean, there was plenty of it. Another day, when I came home, I was standing by in Victoria Dock, and who should this big, tall, elderly gentleman stop me and said, "Hello, Sonny, and what's your name?" I looked at him, I'm not sure who he was, and I said, "John Graham." So he said, "Oh, John," he said, "you're one of my boys, are you?" So I thought, well, it must be something to do with the Holts, this. So I said, "Well, yes." I said, "You know, I've done a first voyage and I've just come back from Australia. And how do you like the Blue Funnel?" And I said, "Yeah, I think it's very, very good. I'm very happy here. Very good sunshine, not sunshine, very good young man," he said. "And it's lovely to meet you." And I said, "And the same to you." And I said, "Who's that guy?" He said, "That's Lawrence Holt." I said, "Oh, bloody hell." I said, "No, not Lawrence Holt," is it? He said, "Yeah."
With such a large fleet of ships sailing east and west through Suez, it was no surprise when Blue Funnel ships and men found themselves in the middle of world-changing events in 1969, when the Arab-Israeli War resulted in the closure of the Suez Canal and the entrapment of more than one Blue Funnel vessel. The captain of one of them, Freddie Squires, recalled Blue Funnel in his early wartime days. And then, later on, when on-board shopping meant something completely different to today, and his experiences of two canals, Panama, straightforward as he puts it, and the Suez Canal, complete with a disbelieving Suez Canal pilot, as well as his involvement with the Blue Funnel ships that were locked in the Great Bitter Lakes.
They had this reputation. They looked after the crews. They were well fed, well paid. The ships were good, the ships were strong, and this was wartime, and he wanted a strong ship. Didn't want it to fall apart at the smell of a torpedo. No, I'd always set my mind on Blue Funnel. Also trading out to the Far East, there was more glamour, more adventure, you know, these long distance hauls. He had scares, of course, but and then there was on the homeward bound convoy. We lost one ship, an older Dempster ship, the Swedru. She was bombed, but that was all. But they're always getting messages, you know, there's submarines, U-boats following, you know, sort of keep a good look out. When we were in Penang, chaps used to come on board and paddlers, and they'd lay out their shops on the decks. And we always used to buy our singlets and t-shirts, briefs, you know, underpants, and all that sort of stuff. It was very cheap. We used to get our good morning towels there. They were short towels, and they're very handy for kicking the sweat off the back of your neck. Panama Canal, that was just another waterway. An amazing piece of engineering, I suppose. But and the way the ships were lifted up and then towed through the locks with these mules. There were electric engines the last time, so I can't remember them being steam engines. Anyway, they used to tow us through these locks. But it seemed to be quite a straightforward bit of navigation. There's more difficulty with the Suez Canal, I think, where the ships were passing each other. It was the Agapina, my ship, and the Melampus, that was another Blue Funnel ship. We were anchored there and waiting to go through. And then we started off this morning, and at 8 o'clock we entered the Suez Canal. And shortly after I went down and was listening to the radio and for the BBC, and they said that there was a war started between Israel and Egypt. So I went up and told the pilot, who was an Egyptian. He said there was no war. He'd just come from home and he'd been listening to the wireless. There was no war on, but we could see the smoke coming up from some airfields that were being bombed ahead of us. And eventually I convinced him that that there was a war on. We were in the middle. I said, "Oh my God, on an English ship again. Last time I was on an English ship." But anyway, we got into the Bitter Lakes, and there we anchored. And we were hoping all the time to get through, but we never did. George Holt, the owner, he came out to see us. And then they decided to reduce the crew, so I had to put the two ships together, head to tail. You know, 2 anchors out from our ship, 2 anchors from the Melampus. And they were tied up, and then that could reduce the crew. But eventually, sometime after I'd left the Suez Canal completely, they did away with crews altogether.
And so the voyages of the China boats went on, to exotic places like Penang, Port Swettenham, Manila, and the ships and the docksides were always busy. course, we cannot forget a major part of any Alfred Holts vessel, the so-called Blue Funnel Chinese, who did lots of different jobs on board. Captain Freddie Squires recalls of them,
Blue Funnel Chinese were good. They had all the rigging, all the derricks, and had to keep they were very proud of keeping their ships clean. I was in the Glengarland there. They kept they kept the ship spotless.
Richard Woodman was a former indentured midshipman with Holts, and is now the author of many books, including this best-selling story of a typical voyage east in a Bluey. Richard recalls starting with the company and remembers Blue Funnel with affection.
Well, quite simply, my father, who knew nothing about the sea, went to the Shipping Federation in London to ask on some career advice, and we went through the tanker companies and P&O, and just as we were leaving, the chap said, then of course there is Blue Funnel, and my father said, what's Blue Funnel? And the Shipping Federation guy said, well, they probably offer the best training for a young cadet. And my father, who nursed ambitions for me to become a lawyer, for some unknown reason, decided that's what we go for, and that's how I came to Liverpool. My hometown was London, certainly, and I think I was regarded as an effete southerner to some extent. Of course, one had to learn Scouse anyway, so you acquired a bit of the lingo and the patois, so I could still do it a bit, you know. But we were fairly fluent in those days. The senior midshipman was your most immediate superior in terms of he told you what to do and you did what you were told. But then when you were put on watch with one of the officers, you understudied the second or third mate, they were, as it were, your person who directed your conduct and your studies and the way you grew up and learned your job as a navigating officer and a seaman. I think my favourite port was probably Hong Kong. I mean, it's just such an exciting and vibrant place, and there was a sense that there was something happening all the time, day or night. We had to work around the clock cargo work, so we were fairly busy, but of course we did get time off, and I think of all the ports I went to, I think Hong Kong remained my favourite. Technically speaking, on board we weren't allowed to drink, so the first thing we did was usually find a bar and have a nice beer. Usually look for a swim. If we were, you of course had to go back to the ship for your cargo watches, but if you got an evening off, we probably went to one of the local bars. You signed on as extra third officer, and then everybody called you fourth mate.
Right.
So that was a kind of fairly sobering thought, but it was very exciting. I mean, you now were in charge of a watch, or substantial part of a watch. You initially served with the chief officer, and kept his watch for him effectively, because he was always a very busy man. I mean, the chief officers and the second engineers were extremely hard-worked men. They really were. I mean, they were married to the ship almost. I always had the greatest admiration for them. And as a junior officer, and then I became third mate, and I kept the 8 to 12 watch, which was. I used to like 4 to 8 as fourth mate, because you got absolutely the best of the day. You'd done half your day's work by breakfast time. And then you had sort of the whole day, unless there was any special work to do, which you basically at sea you had the whole day to read or swim or do a bit of study and write letters and what have you. And then you went on watch again at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You finished by 8 o'clock in the evening. So with a bit of judicious kipping in the afternoon, you could have a very pleasant life. It was always spoiled by arriving on the coast and having to work cargo. We carried mainly manufactured goods out to the Far East, and we mainly bought raw materials, but also manufactured goods back, because the Japanese were beginning to get into the electronic business, and all that was beginning to grow in the early 60s. So we carried a huge variety of things. I mean, almost if you mention it, we bought it home or carried it out, from rare metals, hides, skins, furs, hemp, rubber, even down to things like I remember carrying a tape here. So I always held most of the people I served with in high respect, because they were so very professional. It was a very professionally run company, and it was an organisation which prided itself on its ability to carry cargo safely across the oceans of the world, and that's just what we did.
Today, most of the ships and the men are gone, as are most of the pubs too. But here's a little reminder, once more, of how things used to be. Yet the spirit of Blueys lives on. There are a number of Blue Funnel associations around the world, and not surprisingly, none more active than on Merseyside, the home of Blue Funnel. The Blue Funnel Association's monthly muster maintains some of the old traditions, like members signing articles as they arrive, swing the lamp, meet old friends, and enjoy the camaraderie of sailors. The secretary of the Blue Funnel Association is none other than ex-steward Dave Molyneux, who tries to call those present to order.
Ladies and gents, we're really happy for us tonight. Shut up, time. Hello. We've got no PA system, I'm afraid. It's on the blink, so I'll do my best. I hope everybody can hear me.
Can you use sign language?
Yeah. Come on. Right, ladies and gents, thanks for coming tonight. On behalf of the lads, myself and everybody else on the committee, Happy New Year to everybody.
Also on Merseyside, the Nestorian Association caters for those ex-Blue Funnel officers as well as shore-based personnel who feel the need to stay in touch. Secretary Dennis Naylor reads correspondence, and during our visit, the chairman, Ron Grisdale, finished off with a flourish.
As always, various past life, for want of a better term.
I'd like to finish the best Lou answer tradition. I don't know how many of you saw HMS Bonington last night on television, but I once was on a survey job for a surveyor, and he'd been on the Bonington on his last trip and Prince Charles's last trip. And he vouches that this story is absolutely true. Going along 1 o'clock in the morning, both half asleep, Prince Charles says to him, "I believe it's your last trip." "Yes, sir," he said, still steering the boat. "Oh," he said, "what are you going to be?" He said, "I'm going into ocean survey, sir." "Oh, very good, very good. And what are you going to do, sir?" "I'm going to be a fucking king," he said.
Remember this pub? The Bull Inn, Pentraeth, Anglesey. From the outside there are no clues to any Blue Funnel connection, and on the inside all seems normal enough until you spot this. And so far, despite all our inquiries, we haven't been able to find out how it got there. Do you know? Of course, everyone who sailed with Holts recalls with affection the sights of the Mersey approaches that greeted them as they neared home. Familiar ships and familiar landmarks, so many of which are long gone today. And as always, the busy little tugs that helped the China boats into the welcoming wharves of Gladstone Dock, Liverpool. Safe harbour and home. Perhaps the best way to finish this short voyage is with the voices of some of those who sailed with Blue Funnel. To all of you that did, my thanks and bon voyage.
But it certainly was a wonderful company to train with and gave you a tremendous grounding in your profession.
Finally, if you had your time again, would you do it all again?
I'd do it either, yes. I make all the same mistakes a second time.
Before Alfred Holts and Company went public, they asked, I suppose asked all masters what we thought of it. I didn't really know what to say to him as he was the owner. And I said, well, it would mean that the company could be taken over by somebody else. And he said, well, they'd have to have very deep pockets if they, to do that. But obviously somebody with deep pockets has taken them over. Gone, all gone. Sad. I'm very sad about that. There was something about Blue Funnel. It's a bit like, I suppose, if you were in the army, if you were in the guards, you'd feel superior to the rest. And I think that was with it, our attitude with Blue Funnel. We were the elite, we were the best. Our ships were the best.
I thoroughly enjoyed my job, being a chief steward. I mean, I used to enjoy the passengers, the people that we used to meet. And it was a very, very interesting job, I think so anyway. A job that I used to really like doing.
Do you miss it, John?
Well, let's put it this way. Sometimes if I get a bit of stress on me and I go to sleep.
Dreams is on the ship.
Yeah. I think, your sea career comes back to me.
You mean you're dreaming about it?
Yeah, it comes back to me, yeah. I mean, I don't know why it does it. When if I get under a bit of stress and I go to sleep, I start thinking about ships again.
The ships are still running. I was out in Singapore just 12 months ago. We was on holiday, and the Singapore roads is absolutely chocker with ships. Absolutely chocker. So somebody somewhere is being able to run ships and show a profit. And it's just sad that it Blue Funnel, isn't it? You know.
Still miss it. I didn't when I first packed up when I got married. It was a bit later on that it took me a while to, it seemed to come back on me. I mean, I went to work in Dunlops and used to get the ferry boat over and I'd see a Bluey anchored in the river, and I used to think to myself, oh God, should I apply to go back again? You know, and looking back now, I'd say I miss it more now than what I did when I first packed up. Although it's, you know, that life's gone now. It's completely gone. I suppose I'm living in a dream now. I just keep it up there. But if the companies were still going like they are, I would try and go back again. There's no two ways about it.